Okay,
We're good?
we're good.
All right, well, call the meeting to order, and we'll start with the discussion of a local law amending the use of gas-powered leaf blowers. I think, Larry, we discussed that you, Larry, and Janice would talk about the discussion you had with a group of interested parties a week or so ago.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful rather than, we kind of gave an overview at the last meeting of what we talked about, but I think maybe now for the work session, it'll be helpful to go through the existing law and really look at each of the provisions that's there currently and discuss if there should be changes to it or and we can give perspective on what we heard from some of the stakeholders during our offline meetings. So if you hold on one second, I'll share. Hold on. All right. Okay. So I don't know if may have to close up our pictures on your screen. It depends on how you read it, how you're looking at it on your screen, but okay. All right, so this is the current, let me see if I can increase it a little bit. This helps. Hold on. I don't know if that's helpful or not. Can you all see that? Yeah. Okay. All right. So this is the existing law. Going item by item, as you can see, gas-powered leaf blowers may not be used except in the following situations. So we have spring and fall cleanup periods, which are currently March 15th to June 1st, and then again September 15th to December 15th. And then even within that, we have hours of operation. Monday through Friday are different than the weekends and federal holidays. So I don't know if either Janice or Larry, if you want to suggest a different time window.
Well, I'll comment about that to start, I guess. I know I spoke before that Larchmont had passed a total ban as of January 1st, 2023, I believe it was. And until then, they were allowing gas leaf blowers, but they had a very tight window, especially in the spring period. I think it was only the month of April.
It was only April.
And it was pretty tight on the other end. And I had a conversation with a local landscaper. I also had a conversation with one of the environmental landscapers over in Rye, Blue Jay or Brian Jay or something like that. And I also listened to the sort of testimony given by another environmental landscaper as part of the Larchmont law. And I was taken most by what our local landscaper had said, which is they're so weather dependent during the spring and fall cleanup periods that he sort of laughed about a 1 month period. He said, if it rains for 10 days during that time period, you can't get your work done. So he actually did give some suggestions that tighten it up a little bit. And I'm just going to look at my notes for that. Originally, his sort of quote was that they're so dependent on weather from year to year that if windows are too tight, 10 days of rain in spring or an early snowfall in the winter could totally screw up their ability to function within a tight window. But when I pushed him a little bit, he said he thought that March 15th until early May, until maybe May 15th, could be a spring cleanup period, and October 1st to December 15th could work as well, which would tighten things up for us. I mean, I'm open to other suggestions, and I think we were going to reach out and perhaps Janice and or Larry have reached out to some of the DPW people or the rec people to see what they thought about that time period. But that was sort of what his suggestion was based on his experience, and he's been, working in Irvington for 15 years plus.
Can I just roll this back a little bit to frame it a bit? These conversations that we've been engaged in, we decided to have what, in my own mind, I was calling the Leaf Blower Summit, because we got so much correspondence about this, and it was like Rashomon's elephant. The people who wanted to totally ban leaf blowers, and the people who said you can't do it, or you can't do it now, or you can't do it right away. And all of what we got were persuasive, convinced of the rationale of their position. So we decided to bring a few of them into a room together to talk to the two Larrys and me. And we had a landscaper and a person was the head of the board of one of the multifamily dwellings. I said local landscaper, right? One of the police officers and one of the people who was very active in environmental issues to talk together. And, nobody was saying the other person was absolutely wrong and there was no rationale for their position. This is not like a couple of years ago when we were reading the letters that Greenberg had gotten, where the don't take my leaf blower, you'll have to take it out of my cold, dead hands. That's not the tone of this at all anymore. I think it's much more a sense of things are going to change. It's a question of how to do it in some sort of reasonable, orderly way that permits the technology to develop, things to become a bit more affordable for people to get the new equipment, and for no small part of this, for us to educate the community about the consequences of not making these changes, one of which will be fines, but that's a slightly different issue. Also, I do recall very well that these initial timeframes that we established were with the input of local landscapers, who said that what we have now, March 15th to June 1st, September 15th through December 15th, were reasonable timeframes given the reality of the work that needed to be done and the fact that the weather was somewhat unpredictable. I have no problem with tightening it up a little bit. And, but that's really 2 weeks on both ends is what Larry Lunke, your person, was suggesting. But
which is another month without leaf blowers.
I'm sorry?
That is another month without leaf blowers, which is, significant.
Part of Larchmont's rationale for the really tight spring window was their claim that this spring, they had outlawed all leaf blowers in Larchmont due to COVID. And they claim, when their claim was that hardly anybody noticed it and hardly anybody complained about the lack of leaf blowers at all during the spring, or at least the ruling that they shouldn't be using leaf blowers. But with that said, I think Janice's point about education and communication between the landscapers and the homeowners is really crucial here. And, one of the questions that we have to determine is, do we want to legislate this behavior? Do we want to do what Larchmont did and say, you better get it done because we've determined that if you don't, you're up a creek on January 1st, 2023 or whatever? Or do we want to, work with the community and work with landscapers and try to get an educated group that will eventually recognize change in the way lawns are kept, change in demands that are made upon landscapers. And there are a number of ways to do that. But in essence, we sort of need to decide if we want to legislate this again, if we want to say that. And it was interesting because I had spoken with this guy from Rye, who is a true believer. I mean, he had me on the phone for a half an hour talking about climate change and talking about, an insect apocalypse going on and talking about, blowing away all the cover that prevents, growth of animals and then talking about health issues. And then he And then he said to me, you can't ban gas leaf blowers right now because battery operated leaf blowers just don't work well enough. That gas mowers, cause more of a problem. And if they're not using a gas mower that has been adapted for mulching, which, is an entire educational process and a fairly major expense for people to do it. And, he, after saying all the negatives, he was defending the fact that at this point in time, for most people, they can't, and that the people that use him and his, way of doing things are paying a premium and are true believers in their way and are willing to do that. But he recognized that not everybody does, and he recognized that landscapers, in general as a class, are already very well regulated, in terms of what they can do and what they can't do and what they can use and what they can't use. So after all of that, he said that, he felt that it was really an educational effort that was required, that there had to be enough communication. And again, this was something I heard from all three landscapers, that unless the homeowners and the landscapers said, and Brian says this all the time, unless they're on the same page and are working towards the same goals with the same understandings, it's never going to work. And that's sort of the key to get things done, in my mind. It was interesting. The guy who spoke in front of Larchmont, and again, I could see he was measuring his words, because they were saying, can they work as well? Can gas-powered leaf blowers, be eliminated, and can battery leaf blowers take their place? And, he sort of talked around it. He was talking about newer models coming out and that these are things which will be available and, and are available. Didn't address the battery issue much at all. And I remember his quote, and I said this to Larry and to Janice. I might have said it at the board meeting. He said battery operated leaf blowers can make piles, and gas powered leaf blowers can move piles. And sort of, it depends how much property you have, but not only how much property you have, how many leaves are coming down on your property. All of these people said mulching only goes so far. You can't mulch everything, especially in Irvington, that comes down. So that's where we need to educate. That's where we need to have other options and other choices of things.
Right, and educate both sides. I think make sure that the landscapers and their crews are, whatever we do decide to adopt, that they're informed, that there's real enforcement available, not from our police, but in terms of, in following every landscaper around, but where there are fines for non-compliance. But people need to be given alternatives, and it hasn't worked. Not that there haven't been efforts to do so, there obviously have. But mulching, Larry Lanke, one of the things that you mentioned, we heard it a couple of times, that the lawnmowers simply are not equipped to do the level of mulching that's required for some of the leaf drop in this area. Can't do it.
It was interesting. One of the things that the local landscaper was extremely in favor of was finding both the landscaper and the homeowner.
Right.
He felt that's the fastest way to have communication going back and forth. That, instead of hearing from the homeowner about, what they didn't do or what they left out or which leaves didn't get blown, correctly, now all of a sudden they'll be talking about something else if there are fines going, back and forth. So that gets to the point that, we certainly need to tighten up this law to make it easily enforceable, or much more easily enforceable than it is now, so that when it does get enforced, it's clear that it's being done correctly, and that when it does get enforced, there's a little bite taken out of both sides, which will help to, encourage communication and education.
Yeah, to me, it's like, I wanted to get to a point where if it's, December, whatever date you want to call the June 1st date, or June 2nd, or if it's May 15th, May 16th, they just don't put the gas powered leaf blowers on the trucks anymore. Like to me, it's like, it should be fairly simple to comply with once we tighten this up. Like, especially now if we're going to get rid of, decibel levels and things like that, we're just going to have, if it's powered by gas, you can't use it. And I think my only question on that was, did anyone talk about the 4-stroke engines, and is anyone using them?
No one I know is using them. The guy I spoke with said that from his supplier, at least this past spring, there weren't any available at this point.
Because it addresses it addresses some of the issues, like some of the pollution issues, but it still is going to be blowing all the other stuff off the ground and stuff like the.
Right. I mean, I think they're slightly less. I think they're a lot heavier, from what I've read about them. They could be a stopgap for a short period of time, but I'm not sure that's really the answer at this point. And I think, Larry, you did a little bit of research as to Westchester County, and I think we may have heard from somebody that the county was requiring them, and I don't think that's the case.
No, that's
I
not.
think the county was just limiting the 2-stroke engines to things which had been done after 2007 or 2008 or something.
They had to, they had to be compliant with certain levels of EPA standards. And I think there's even newer levels now that aren't in the current, in what was being published on the Westchester County Consumer Protection website. So I don't think anything we're doing here is going to be in conflict with that. It'll be, if anything, more strict. But okay, so is there any?
Did anybody else hear anything else about 4-stroke engines? Because I reached out and he really didn't have a whole lot to say.
Anyone I spoke to has not used them ever. Like I wasn't able to talk to one person, professionals or otherwise, that had used them. They didn't say they don't exist. They just said that they haven't used them personally.
Mm-hmm.
The good news here is I think that there's a general agreement that the technology is improving and that gas leaf blowers will not be necessary a couple of years down the line, 2 or 3 or 4, nobody's making an exact date, but that right now what we heard consistently was from anybody who is working in the business, is trying to take care of leaves on any property, is that it's just not feasible for them to do everything. And so how do we limit and craft this so that we are going towards that goal that we all want, which is to stop the use of them? And it might not be, pardon the pun, but it might not be pulling the plug right now, but phasing it in.
Okay, so do we have any other comments about the time period, the time windows? It was March 15th to May 31st? Did I get that right? I'm sorry.
The proposal from Larry, March 15th to May 15th, I believe.
Yes, okay.
And then October 1st to December 16th.
Right. So we're cutting off 2 weeks. We're cutting off a month. Okay.
A month, yeah. Which is, not insignificant.
Not insignificant.
Right. Okay.
Wait,
Still-
I'm sorry.
still
Did you say
allows
May
Mother
1st to
Nature.
May 15th, Brian?
15th is. what I
So
was
March
trying-
15th through May 15th,
Correct.
and September 15th through
October 1st.
October 1st to December 15th.
Okay.
You got
Right.
it.
Okay.
And then anything about the time windows?
Yeah, I'd love to try to standardize that, but I'm concerned about the weekends. People do, during the week, they need to start. I don't think, I'm not really sure what the answer is. I'm open to suggestions about that.
And also, we do have a number of people who they do take care of their own property, and the only time they can actually do that is during the weekends. So we can, again, I think, tighten that time frame a bit. But you're going to need landscapers if we have a really rainy week. It goes back to what Larry Lonke said before. So much of this is weather dependent. So if there's a really rainy week and the landscapers can't get to their regular clients Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, it's kind of tough to shut it down entirely on the weekends. I think I think about this a lot. I think the 10 to 4 is probably the best we can do.
But are you saying 10 to 4 on weekdays as well, or?
No. The 8 to
Right.
5 on weekdays, but the 10 to 4, we could maybe shorten the window a bit.
But I mean, if we're not going to standardize hours, which I'm not sure we can from weekdays to weekends, I'm not really sure that we need to change. I mean, the other alternative, is perhaps only one day on the weekend. Maybe not allow them on Sundays.
If it rains on Saturday, not on Sunday, then you.
Well, Saturday gives them the backup time for if it rains during the week.
Yeah, I think it's just if the homeowner
Okay.
does it themselves.
Okay, I like that. So make it say not at all on Sunday, because that at least ensures everybody one day where they won't be driven mad by the leaf blowers.
I mean, it does impinge a little on homeowners' abilities to do their own work, but that's a consideration.
But I don't think I've ever gotten a complaint about a homeowner. So, that doesn't seem to be that they're the issue at all anyway. So, so if someone actually ended up not being able to do it on a Saturday and did it on a Sunday, it probably, it's not going to be, six homes in a row with 3 people with backpack leaf blowers. So.
Right.
Exactly. All right, so that sounds reasonable.
And what about holidays?
That's probably not on holidays. It's kind of like a Sunday.
Yeah, I would agree. The whole purpose here is try and narrow this as much as we can at this point without being unreasonable.
And for landscapers, I don't think they typically work on holidays, except maybe a Columbus Day type holiday. But looking at March through May, there aren't too many holidays other than probably Easter, which is a Sunday. We have such a limited period now that I don't think there's even that many holidays that fall in our period. So I think it's okay to say no holidays.
Okay.
Next provision allows for, this is provision number 2, allows for 1 or 2 family properties, the property owner allowing them to use it all year round for 30 minutes a day. I think in the interest of making it simpler, I think this was one where this exception could be eliminated.
I would agree.
Agree. For the same reason Brian said before, the likelihood of a particular homeowner coming out with his leaf blower for half an hour is unlikely to cause hysteria, but I don't think we need to carve it out as an exception.
Yeah, the ability for the police and even residents to be able to know that they're within or they're outside of the normal window, that if anything is seen outside of that window, it's not allowed. That's important to enforce. Right. So, okay.
And again, we're not saying that they can't use battery-powered leaf blowers. You know, and even if a battery-powered, I think I've said this before, but even if a battery-powered leaf blower is half as effective, they can use it for an hour instead of for 30 minutes. For 30 minutes during that window period.
Right.
And electric leaf blowers, corded leaf blowers for a local home. Part of the comments about the homeowners where I want to clear off my deck or I want to be able to do things like that. I mean, certainly that can be done with a battery or a electric powered leaf blower.
Right. Okay, number 3 is already out. That expired, or sunset, whatever. Number 4, golf and tennis clubs and municipal employees within 100 feet of the nearest residence, not within 100 feet of the nearest residence. I think.
Have we talked to the rec and the DPW about this? Because cleaning up parks is very different than even the biggest yard, right?
Yeah, I did speak to Joe Artino at some length about this. So they are, he has moved from feeling that, has moved from feeling that gas leaf blowers are absolutely essential in all aspects of the village work, to say, no, they can really do with electric in lots of situations, but they do still need the gas in certain places.
So then we leave this in and see if there's,
Larry, you know what? I'm looking at two different versions, so I'm losing the numbering here. What number are we on? What's on the screen? What number are we on?
Number 4.
Number 4. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so the consensus is to leave it
But I
in.
mean, I think we need to trust that our municipal employees will act responsibly. I think that's really the key here. You know, again, I don't want to harp back on Larchmont, but Larchmont actually made the commitment that their municipal employees were going to follow the same law as everyone else. I'm not quite sure that we can really do that, but I think certainly Joe has had enough experience now to be able to sort of triage what gets done where.
Right, and he was very clear that we all, every village department, every village piece of lawn, we have to be show by example that we're doing it, whether it's, you know, village hall or the rec department or the library, that we are absolutely doing as minimally invasive as we can possibly do, and that we are communicating that through all of our departments and how we all conduct ourselves.
All right, can I just check that you guys can hear me, because you couldn't
No.
hear me before?
we can hear
Yes.
you.
Oh, okay, all right, I was gonna say something, but I said something and nobody responded, so I guess I wasn't
You
heard.
were on mute. I could see
Yeah, I
that.
know, it was odd. I would sit at the bottom of my thing. Well, I wasn't, but then I looked at another control. Anyway, that's fine. I was just wondering if the screen was moving up and down, or which, but we're still on 4. Is that what you were saying the last?
Yes,
Correct.
I was thinking the screen couldn't move on my screen, but you haven't moved it.
I'm controlling it,
No.
right.
Yeah, I mean, I was right. I wanted to see below, but I couldn't. That's all right. That's fine. And I did have one other comment that I started to say, but I can get back to it. So keep going.
Well, Connie, if it refers to 1, 2, 3, or 4, why don't you say it?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. All right. Yeah. You know, I'm very impressed with what you all have learned from this summit, if that's what you're calling it, and the understanding that if in the current situation with the technology and the current view of what customers essentially want, it's just not doable with the technology we had. But I was very interested in this idea of a goal for totally eliminating it as an incentive. And when Larry Lonke was talking about Larchmont, I had been under the impression initially from discussion that Larchmont had actually banned gas-powered leaf blowers now. And now what I'm understanding is that's not the case, right?
Correct.
No,
Okay,
it's going to be, it's going to be this fall cleanup, next spring cleanup, next fall cleanup, all will still, you know, and they're saying that's the time that we're going to give you to get everything in, you know, all your ducks in a row, because as of January 1st.
Okay, so
Of
that's a
2022.
really interesting bit of information to me, but I don't know, and I'm just thinking about this for the first time, but as a motivator for everyone to understand the seriousness of where we want to go with this, and I know it would be a kind of arbitrary date, but I'm beginning to think it might be helpful to bring down the seriousness of how much we expect behaviors to change by putting somewhere in the law this sunset on the total use. So it's something I'd like, you know, everybody to think about a bit. And I definitely like the tightening up. I like the tightening up so that through May, when people are really more outside, I think tightening those 2 weeks is really smart. And the Sunday, I think, is really smart. And the last part about this is, I don't know how we approach this, but last time when we had the board meeting, I listened to some of the people who are concerned about the current COVID crisis and it being a respiratory problem. And I just wonder, where are we going to be in the spring of 2021 if come March, during that spring time, if it's a very severe time for COVID, is it really a good idea to allow the gas-powered leaf blowers to start up during that time?
Right. Well, again, that doesn't have to be part of this law. That can be
That's right.
done
Yes,
by the mayor.
okay.
That can be done
All
by
right,
the
so
mayor.
Can I, right.
Yeah.
That's what I would like to really keep on top of people's minds, because I think that was a very valid concern that people had. And we don't know where we're going to be at that time next year. So if it's an emergency change, let's keep it on the top of our consciousness, because it would be important, I think, to a lot of people. Okay, thanks.
Well, as far as a drop dead date or a sunset date, Mary Ann, is there a way that we can demand a review of this law by a certain date?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
But I'm not sure another board has to pay attention to what we would say.
Well, the
to
way
happen
you
in
would
20
do that is, say, I don't know if you would want to do this, but this is the way you would do it. You would say that, at whatever date it is, let's say it's January 2023, that, gas-powered leaf blowers aren't allowed at all after January 2023. And then if they wanted to change it, they would have to, I think sort of the way it's in this draft now. I'm not when you're looking at there on the draft law where it says until 12/16/20, no,
Right.
effective 12/16/20, using or operating or permitting to be used or
Right.
operate any gas-powered leaf blower at any time. That's forbidden. That's what you would do. You would put it
Right.
in with the date. And
Right,
then
I'm
you would have to revisit.
Right. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that idea of legislation. I'd be more comfortable with the suggestion, but I'm not sure
Yeah.
we could suggest.
Larry
Yeah,
can put a
I-
calendar reminder in.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the way Albany does it all the time. Rent control comes up every, couple of years or whatever, and it sunsets, and
You have to
we
deal
debate
with
it,
Well, I like the system that Mary Ann just, outlined. I'm not saying suggested, but, told us about. I like that. I guess it's a little stronger message, and it does ask a board at that time to, do something. And
We simply can't, at this, sitting here tonight, we can't say, we know that there should absolutely be no need for gas-powered leaf blowers after 2023. Maybe, hopefully, probably, possibly, but we can't be sure. So do we want to write a law that perhaps is 6 months ahead of what's humanly possible, or do we want to leave it wide open, or do we want to structure it so that it needs to be revisited?
So revisited would be forced upon that board. They would revisit it by having such a date in there. And they would say, we want to change that and change that law. But it would
But I
make
guess
them do it.
perhaps if there was wording, I think it's important that the perspective of the reason why we're doing this, acknowledging climate change, acknowledging the damage that's been done to wildlife and natural life, due to these things, and that we're trying to do, what's admittedly a small part of this, and perhaps within that introductory paragraph, also say that, we want this to be reviewed at some point in the future. Well,
Right,
you know,
because the intent is to get to the point where we do not have to use gas-powered leaf blowers, but that at this point, we do need it to be, we can establish certain guidelines that we expect will be reviewed by a certain date.
Yeah, well, I like the motivator of dates. I mean, it's so easy to just let things go and go. But if a future board is committed to looking at it, then they have the power to go whichever direction seems appropriate at that time. It's a big motivator. So that's where I stand. We can discuss it, or you know, maybe there'll be some other information that surfaces, but that's my thinking right now.
Okay.
let's move along.
Yeah. So provision number 5 is, pretty broad, but when responding to an emergency.
Yeah, I think leave that in.
Yeah, I mean, do we want to make it a little tighter, Larry, and saying that there's like an emergency declaration or something? Or, I mean, I guess we could leave it vague like this, but it just seems like one man's emergency is another woman's non-emergency. I don't know. But, to me, you kind of know when you see it, but I'm fine with leaving it in. I'm not sure why I'm being devil's advocate here, but.
How does,
I'm not too worried about this being misused, about people saying,
I
it's
agree.
because my leaf, there are leaves on my lawn, so it's an emergency. I think people will get this one.
one that we talked about a fair amount in our meeting was when removing snow. And I mean, we got, well, certainly the landscaper who was involved didn't have too much of a perspective on that. Maybe that's not a big part of his business, but the multifamily person was pretty adamant. And I also did follow up with Caesar Manfredi at Half Moon South. And, they are committed to using battery. They have a pretty new and powerful unit that they are using now to do some of their cleanup work in the fall. And but their maintenance person was pretty certain that for the times when they need to clear certain amounts of snow, not obviously very large snowfalls, but certain amounts of snow, that this battery powered unit will not work. Now, they haven't gone through a winter yet because they just purchased it in the last month or so, but that was their opinion on it based upon using it so far.
I mean, I don't think that snow removal has ever received a complaint, at least not in my memory. To me, we're going again, the biggest issues are the, multi-backpack people using them on multi pieces of property for an extended period where, I think snowfall is typically a different use case, and I don't have any problem with it myself.
Well,
Yeah, and the multifamily
blowing snow is blowing it not on soil, it's blowing snow on
off sidewalks.
Sidewalks.
Not destroying the soil and the nutrients and all that. So I'm not so worried about the snow.
Right. And it's multifamily, and they've got to clear quickly, and they've got to, make sure people can get out of their houses and the kids can get out to the school buses and such. So I thought that was perfectly reasonable. Well, reasonable.
Okay. Okay. Walk behind leaf blowers. So these are maybe not, I don't know all different types of equipment, but I know the 4-stroke leaf blowers that you're all talking about. I think the only ones that are out there now are the walk behind ones. Not saying that all walk behind are 4-stroke. But right now, this provision has probably never been discussed since it was written. You know what I mean? Like, we don't get calls to the police department about this. I don't think the police department go out and decide what's on a half an acre or not. It doesn't come up. I would tend to think that this doesn't need to be here, but that's.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I was gonna say, this is one of those that to me just makes things more complicated, and I would lean towards removing it.
And the reason that they're, to the extent that they are necessary on big properties, we're talking what we talked about before, multifamily, the village parks and properties, the country club, whatever, not just big houses with big lawns. So I would agree that should go.
Which means they can be used
Anywhere.
anywhere during the windows of time and days, right? Okay.
Again, it comes back to me almost like looking ahead to the next one. It's the big debate of, do you want to have, if only two handhelds and no walk behinds, and it takes an hour, versus you can do it all in 15 minutes with 4 handhelds and
Right.
2 walk behinds. Like, to me, we're getting too deep into the weeds of trying to. This was we were trying to figure too many things out. Yeah, so
So,
I think we take it out.
So that was for C as well.
yeah,
I'm for both.
That you're right. No, I mean that's what you were suggesting, Brian, right?
Correct.
Okay.
B and C.
I'm so sorry, but I'm hearing this like buzz, buzz, buzz. Is there some noise that's bothering everybody?
I hear
Yeah.
it a little bit too.
yeah, I hear it too.
So it's making it, I mean, for me, it's just making it really hard to actually hear what you all are saying. So I don't know where it's coming from, but
Let me try something on my computer. The fan seems to be running, but it's very low on my side, but it could be that. Hold on.
I hear
Maybe
like a bell kind.
Maybe try muting yourself, Larry.
Yeah, no, I know that it was last time it was me, remember?
that's better.
That was me?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
It
me.
was you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Well,
All right. It's like my worst nightmare here. Now you're totally muted.
Yeah. He's either going to be
It's all or nothing. Larry's totally muted.
yeah, I don't know. This thing, I guess,
Now it's back.
I know. That's because I do have to talk once in a while. It's the problem.
you can't just type in the chat.
Yeah, I know, right? You probably would want me to. All right. Well, I'll try to mute myself when I'm not talking. I'm sorry. And so maybe I just won't talk much. Okay. So B and C are out. D is specific restrictions on gas-powered leaf blowers. So D1 and 2 seem to be fairly kind of mom and apple pie. 3 was the troublesome one in any of our discussions because it's really unenforceable, and people
Completely unenforceable.
people read this to mean that we're supposed to be out there with a decibel meter, but that's actually not what it says. So
Right.
it's anyway. So I'm open to suggestions on that one.
I think it was very well intentioned, but I'm almost thinking that, can we make one more generic that just says, all current, what's the wording on the second one? Meets all current standards of the, EPA or others, because it does seem like the ANSI standard B175-2 was going to be in effect. So to me, if you bought something after that, it should be in compliance with that anyway. Would be my guess. So to me, it's if we could make number 1 a little more generic, but not call out the decibel level specifically.
Right, agreed. And then on the county law, which Larry Schofer, you found for us, it talks about the EPA exhaust emission standards. So maybe that's generic enough, but it means it has to, nobody's going to go out there with a decibel level, but we were saying you have to meet noise standards.
But wait a minute, but one just deals with you're just talking about exhaust standards, which are
Right.
totally different from noise standards.
Right. And both of them are issues.
Well, to me, almost, we don't say like current environmental protection exhaust standards that there'll be no particles, more than blah, blah. Like, we don't give a specific, but we also say meets current environmental protection exhaust standards, as well as the noise standards of ANSI standard B175-2 or whatever.
Yeah.
Which doesn't specifically say 65 decibels, but it,
What does it say?
I don't know. No, I'm saying our law says it, but I'm like, we don't know what the current EPA exhaust standards are. We don't call that out specifically, but
Mm-hmm.
is there a way to generically say it has to also comply with ANSI standard, B or whatever current ANSI standard for noise or something like that?
But I don't think if maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think it's like the EPA standards you're supposed to comply with. I don't know that the ANSI standards you're supposed to comply with. It just, I think they're different.
I'd be willing to just forego it all, but
Larry, whatever, Janice said, you said something from the county. I didn't get it, so I don't know what it is. Does that have a noise standard in it?
I was
No,
looking, I just saw the emissions one.
It only dealt with emissions, if I'm not mistaken. So, no, that was really just, all it did was point to the EPA standards. So that was what the county is requiring of its licensed contractors. So contractors, home improvement contractors, or I guess,
Sorry, it doesn't have a noise standard in there.
no,
just
I don't believe so.
So,
And in any event, I don't know how we would enforce it anyway. So
no.
Right.
other than saying, okay, get the box or look at the label. If there's something on a label, I doubt it, but get the manual and show us how it complies. I mean, it's kind of meaningless.
so the thing that really bothers people is the length of time that these noisy machines are used, and even observing that they're being used for trivial things like, they have the one leaf on the street. It's the amount of time that goes on that is for trivial or unimportant to the main landscaping job that they're there to do. And I think if there was a way to put some kind of words that would require that they don't keep using them at that, for longer periods of time, that would make a lot of people, me included, very happy. I don't know how you do it. I don't know where the line is between, a few leaves on the edge of the curb that goes into the middle of the street so that they go over to another household on the same street. It's total useless noise. And I don't know where that goes.
Right. See, that's part of the education process. And
Yes,
that's,
exactly.
I think the point I keep coming back to is, you can't legislate all of this stuff, you can't legislate that they use it in a reasonable manner. I mean, that's not anything that.
Or you can't say if there's fewer than 100 leaves there, you can't use it. I mean, you just can't do that.
But if you can get an educational process going where they realize that that's not what should be done, that's not what the homeowner wants to be done, or if the homeowner is educated that that's not what they want to be done,
Exactly.
That's where we really have to sort of get this.
And Nikki Coddington had a really good suggestion last time, and I think we all kind of nodded and smiled when she said it. If homeowners who really want to limit the use to the absolutely essential and don't want the chasing of the stray leaf could somehow indicate on a green back door or something so that the crew would know that this is what the homeowner wants. And it would also be a way of other homeowners saying, ooh, I don't have my green sign yet, I guess I better get it. But it's ultimately up to the homeowner to direct the landscaper. And Brian, I know you've had an impossible time, no matter how many times you've told them stop chasing the leaf, but it's the education, the responsibility to educate is on us, and it goes to both the homeowner and the landscaper. So one of the suggestions I heard was, and Larry, you may be doing this, Larry Schofer, so when people apply for a license or a permit, when landscapers apply, will be given a copy of whatever the law is that we enact, obviously. And some of the specifics about what that means, can we educate them about, you know, what we'd like to be moving towards, and less is better than more, and that homeowners can opt into the lesser approach by putting this green sign in their door, and make sure everybody's very aware of that?
That would
Yeah,
be
I mean,
great.
one of the beneficial things about having the landscaper registration that we've done is that not only do we absolutely come in contact with them once a year, but we also, you know, have a database that we're able to reach out, and we were able to do that this past spring on a few occasions. So yeah, it's wide open as to what we provide them, and, you know, the educational material or whatever. I think there's a homeowner education thing that we have to go through.
Yeah.
The whole
Yes.
different animal.
Yes.
And I really do like Nikki's idea of putting a sign out front that says, you know, I don't need you to blow my lawn. You know, it's.
She used an analogy. It was actually a very good one. When you're in a hotel and you don't want the cleaning crew to come in and clean your towels if you're there for multiple nights, you know, you don't need to have your towels cleaned or your sheets changed every night.
Right. Yes, I agreed. It was a great idea. Is there a part of this that, or maybe it's just the procedural part when your landscapers come in, but here's an example of what you give to your customer. You give them, you know, a handful of these, and they can put them out or not, but that the landscaper actually gets those things, those signs, or they put it on your door, and they have a pile of them, and they give them out to their customers, and then when the customer uses them, they know to abide by it.
Right, but at the same time, the customer, you know, needs to be educated. You know, I
Yeah,
go
yes,
back
of
to,
course, right.
you know, I go back to when we originally, you know, I'm sure Mark was involved with this, with the original enterprise ads for Love 'em and Leave 'em.
Yeah, right.
And it had landscapers talking about doing it, but it's the homeowners that have to agree that that's what they want to have
Right.
done. You know, landscapers coming to you and saying, do you want me to blow your leaves less?
Right.
You
No,
know,
yeah.
they have to know why that's important. They have to be educated as to why that's important.
I think the nature of that that sign could be pretty compelling to the homeowner. Here are the reasons you might want to do this.
Right.
But
I love
but I
my
don't-
community. You know,
But
I
do
love my
not-
community, and I'm sorry, Janice.
It's on us. It's not on the landscaper to educate the homeowner. You know,
Well, they can hand it out.
I don't agree. I think that's putting too much on the landscaper to say, we need to distribute that material. We need to do a mailing. We need to do a mayor's blast. We need to, you know, enclose it with some other kind of mailing that we do.
I think you do it from both ends.
No.
Yes, yes to all the above that you just mentioned, but also yes and.
Little improv. I like it.
Yes and, yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's phase 2 of all this is, you know, figuring out the most effective ways to educate the public. Because again, my contention is that the expectations that the landscapers think that the homeowners have, there's a big gap between actual expectations and from the, you know, half a dozen or so people that complain when there's a leaf on their driveway in July, to, you know, the average homeowner who's like, I couldn't care less. I just don't want to have, you know, 3-foot tall grass in the backyard. So.
Right. I think the public is a little further along in that than we think.
I agree.
We'll find out.
Okay, should we get back to it, Larry? Where do we go? Penalty. I said we jack up the fines.
Jail.
Wait, how did we get to
My
public
microphone,
advice?
hold on, my microphone thing's not working too well.
And they should wear a helmet. I saw helmet safety.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
You're
Brian is
The only
public
thing-
intoxication. Right, there we go. Okay.
All right, the only thing left, really the only thing left is to discuss how you want the penalty structured. Now, What I don't remember, and maybe Mary Ann remembers better.
Yeah, well, this is what you had agreed to last time.
Yeah,
Is that, okay, persons found guilty. Okay, for any person found guilty of violating subsection B10, which is this one, and any property owner or tenant on whose property such a violation occurs shall be subject to a penalty of $250 for the first offense and $500 for any subsequent offense.
Does that mean 2 penalties for the landscaper and the homeowner, or is that just?
Yes.
That's the way it reads.
Okay,
Yeah.
I like that.
I mean, they don't have to, I mean, the cops don't have, or whoever's given it doesn't have to give them to both, but they could.
I think to me, again, the habitual offenders are what we're really after here. And that's, I think that's quite a deterrent. You must really not like leaves in July.
okay, so we'll pick up that penalty provision along with these other changes that we went through, right? Any other comments on the things we discussed, or just we'll generate a new draft and
Are we not putting in a drop dead date?
right, that is an open issue.
I think that's an open issue.
I'm a little torn because I like the idea of making someone, have to renew this to keep it going. But I feel like I don't have enough clarity on when we think that might be, when that appropriate date is. Like to put it, 5 years from now or 2 years from now or 10 years from now, to me, it's, I'd like to think that it's going to be a topic that we're going to look at every year anyway. And almost have that summit reconvene every year to see if there's been developments. And frankly, I think we're going to find out from our own rec department and our own DPW that there have been like, oh, wow, like almost like what they've said now with some of the hybrid vehicles, like we're ready to use the hybrid vehicles. They're powerful enough to, be a primary vehicle, and the police, same with the police department, that type of thing. So I don't think this is going to go, I don't think we're going to forget about gas powered leaf blowers. I think there's enough people in town who are opposed to them. I think that the technology is going to evolve. I don't think we necessarily have to put it in, and does it make it easier to pass it without it too? I don't know. But I'm a little bit torn because it is a powerful thing to say that in 3 years it's gone, except if someone renews this. I think we'd have to kind of hedge it again and say, hey, we expect it to, not be abolished until the appropriate replacements are put into place, but that doesn't necessarily mean that would happen. So I think the one fear is if, like today, I think we're all in unanimous agreement that the technology is not ready. So if we put a 2-year out date and there's a completely different board, and either through inaction or just not looking at it, then they could all be banned. As opposed to the other way around, and it might be before it's done. And I think it's a lot easier just to let something expire than to actually have to pass a law that would ban it before it's time. And I think that's probably my tiebreaker on not putting it in.
Well, I get the two sides to it, but I think about the motivator for things. I don't know if this is a fair analogy, but in this by 2020 something, the admission standards for cars must be this, and then they must be this those years. I mean, we don't have to go year to year, but there's certainly precedents. I don't know if seatbelts went in all at once. I think it was by this year, all the cars must have this. So it just motivates people, and it adds a sense of seriousness to what we're doing. I think it's effective. I think, the we don't know who the we is. 2023, it'd be interesting why Larchmont picked that year. If it's connected to the
I think it's 2022.
technology. Excuse me?
I think it's 2022.
Oh, 22. Well, then why don't we say 23, and that.
But the thing is, we don't control how the technology is.
I know, Janice, I know, of
So
course.
to put in a date is
But
like,
we know that the next board that is there will just be forced to look at it. So we don't know what will happen. Of course we don't. But we are saying, we think now in this year, you ought to have a goal and you ought to go for it. And it adds a seriousness to what we're doing, as opposed to, well, maybe someday some board will look at it. So yeah, I fully understand we don't know, but that board gets to do what they want at that time, but they have to do something.
I don't think there's much danger in this community of any board being forgetting about the importance of this issue.
I don't know.
I'm just concerned about setting an unrealistic deadline that then, becomes either unenforceable or leads to unintended consequences.
Yeah, well, I guess I see the worst unintended consequences without doing it. I think it's a powerful motivator. So, all right, that's, we can agree to disagree.
I agree with Connie. I think you have to have a date in there in order to make people focus on the fact that there is a deadline. The board's going to take it up again 2 years from now. It's going to be the same board most likely, because if we're talking now, the elections won't have happened for Connie and Janice yet. So it's the same board looking at it in 2 years from now.
No, we have one more year. You guys are getting elected for a 2-year term.
Oh, you guys have one more year. Yeah, okay. Well, anyways, I think it's that. And I think also from a political standpoint, having to address the people who really don't want the leaf blowers, gas leaf blowers, it's a palliative option to say, look, there's a sunset clause, and the intention is it's going to be looked at again and reevaluated as to effectiveness.
Well, I obviously agree with Mark. I mean, I do. I really, I've seen it in other things. It makes you come back to it. And it does send a message right now. So,
Larry,
we just need to hear from a few other people, I guess.
I think one other. Sorry.
No. Listen, I like the idea of it being reviewable. I came to this not thinking about the idea that it could be overturned. I was thinking of it as an absolute, which is why I didn't want, I felt legislating that it was happening at a certain date, I was not in favor of. But I hadn't thought about the fact that, at that date, it can then be extended or changed. And I tend to agree with Mark's, statement about it's important that we make a statement as a board about how important this is, and that we're willing to sort of put it out there that we think it's important. So I think I'm leaning in that direction. I think I'm leaning towards that. Now, what that date's going to be, I think, whether it's 2022 or, listen, I was the one at the beginning who said, December 16th, 2020. So,
right.
But that was before I really educated myself about what was out there and what, people want and need and what they can achieve.
What's feasible.
Yeah, right. And I was there too, Larry, that, this could sunset now, but like I said, I'm impressed with the research and the analysis about, the current situation, but it doesn't change my sense that, it's a very important thing, and we can make that point, and some somebodies who happen to be here in our chairs at that time can just say, okay, we need to extend this for a year or whatever. They can do whatever.
But this is what we're doing now. And in point of fact, the law that we passed, or we're considering passing, that had the sunset of 2020 wasn't feasible. And it has required a lot of hours of time to try and educate ourselves and figure it out and bring in all of the stakeholders and look at what may or may not be feasible. And one of the things we clearly do not have is a definite date by which this is likely to happen, because we don't control the technology and we don't control what's coming down the pike. So if you're determined to have a date in it, instead of putting some future board through this series of hoops again, I would suggest, if you insist on doing it, making it far enough out that it's a reasonable time frame. So maybe 2024.
That's
Well-
unreasonable.
Hmm.
Look, there's a political rationale here too, and this is that our board should be looking at what's best for our residents. And to push it out to 2024 is just absurdity at this point. We should have a much—
Don't call it an absurdity. We're having a conversation. People have different thoughts. We can perhaps try to keep this civil.
Oh, you know what? Whatever, get your tail in a knot all you want. All I'm saying is that it's irresponsible, in my consideration, to push it off that far. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't know. I agree that it doesn't need to go that far. I mean, I don't think it's, it's a point of view, but I do think that it's not such a burden on a board. I mean, if we have outlined all these points to this law, from point A, how long is this? We've read through A, B, C, D, E. And if the only thing this board has to do is look at it and say, boy, they really thought this through, but the date isn't right. And there may not, they could take a whole new review of it, but they may very well just say, well, let's take a look at the technology. Let's see how far it's come. Let's see if we've had any particular problems. And instead of being 8 or 9 different meetings, I can see it being 1 or 2. And you say, okay, we're going to change the date. Or,
But the other thing to remember is we're not just talking about a date at which battery operated leaf blowers may achieve what gas does now, but we're also talking about a change in behavior. And
yes.
One of the reasons that I've changed to the idea of giving a date is I think it puts more pressure on us, that it'll force us to really get out there and try to change behavior and try to change attitudes and try and get these things done. And we can say it's got to get done by this date, otherwise you're in trouble. But frankly, the idea is a board can change that or extend that date if they need to. But if we have a date of 2023 or 2022, it sort of forces us to put our money where our mouth is as well.
Yeah. Well, I agree with all those reasons, obviously. So if you don't remember what Larchmont, if you think it's 22, that would be interesting. If it's 23, that would be interesting. I guess somebody could look it up. I'm not saying we have to do what they do, but it's an interesting, point.
Somehow I'm thinking it's 2022 because my time frame I remember was they were going to allow just for 2 more fall cleanups, 2 more winter cleanups, this one and one
It's
more.
January 1st, 2022. So
Right.
in effect, it's a little over a year. That's what's in their law.
Okay.
But I think we have certainly found by this exercise we've done this time around that making a too tight time frame, if we're going to put in a time frame, making it too tight just invites another go round of this. So perhaps we could make it 2023.
I could agree with that.
All right, I can go with 23. I mean, if there's interest in doing it sooner, you could take it up sooner. Nobody says you can't come back and change a law at any point. So, but at least it's a motivator so that too much time doesn't go by. So,
Brian, what do you think?
It's, to me, it's fine with me if we want to, put it out further. But to me, again, I thought Larchmont was having it, Tuesday. So we have to also work on the messaging of this because, I was actually curious to see how Larchmont was going to react to the whole thing, but now we won't know for another year and a half or whatever. So yeah, to me,
What I found amazing about Larchmont, and I don't know the community other than, you know, I kind of think it's a leafy community, but
Yeah.
they had no objections from any kind of multifamily housing units. So, you know, they had so few people that spoke in opposition. And I didn't watch 2 entire meetings, but I, you know, watched parts of of 2 meetings where it was first brought up and then where it was voted on. And, you know, the first meeting was a fairly cogent presentation by their environmental group. And then the second, you know, they kept saying, any comments, any questions, any problems? And there weren't any. That's not our community.
I wonder why they didn't put it just this year then, if everyone wanted it so badly.
Well, I think that was part of the strategy of this environmental group, was they realized that they didn't want to push it to the point where they were going to, I think they want to educate and change behavior as well.
Okay, so we're good with that, it sounds like?
We're good with what? I'm kind of.
What, January 1st,
Okay.
23, yeah.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
For a sunset provision, or whatever Mary Ann wants to call it.
Okay.
All right. I think that's it
All
for
right.
the agenda.
Make a motion to adjourn if I can have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. There's a meeting with Mary Ann.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
We have to
thanks.
leave and re-sign
Yeah.
it, right?